A decade ago this very month, I had walked through the Euromaidan. On the cobbled streets in Kiev spanned crowds of thousands. They were jubilant, humorous, and optimistic. They sang, cheered in peaceful protest. On stage, speeches were extolling the promise of a future independent of Kremlin domination, enabled by oligarchs and their corruption, gave voice to generations of Ukrainians fed up by the old order. Ukrainians that survived Stalin's famine 90 years ago through Holodomor, Ukrainians whose perilous march to freedom had been perpetually subjected to subversion. As far as the eye could see, ribbons of yellow and blue adorned a people with the powerful idea that they might soon be free of the yoke of the neo-colonial revanchist ambitions. Free of a neighbor they longed for good relations with, yet a neighbor determined to deny the self-determination of an entire people. I had been accompanying my friend and former boss, Canada's Foreign Minister John Baird. I watched him take in what we had been witnessing together, make a wide grin, then take to the stage to stand with the people whose moment of independence had arrived. Months later, we returned to charred buildings of cobblestone ripped from the ground by protesters fighting a government that turns its guns on them, and of flowers laid before portraits of the fallen. In the subsequent vacuum of transition, March 2014, Russia illegally annexed Crimea. It was the opening chapter of what now constitutes Russia's invasion of Ukraine. By April, Russian Special Operations, Spetsnaz GRU units, paratroopers of the 45th Guards Spetsnaz Brigade of the VDV, and Wagner contractors seized territory in the Donbass. Too often, we start the story at the middle and not at the beginning. To some, the story of Ukrainian independence commenced in the mid-2000s amid political turmoil, economic challenges, and external pressure. The Orange Revolution in 2004 set the stage for a democratic transition, but the road ahead was far from smooth. At communism's end, Ukraine held the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world. They divested that power to guarantee their territory. And in 1994, they received those guarantees from the Russian Federation, the United States, the United Kingdom at Budapest. Had the Allied world deepened its commitment to Ukraine territorial integrity, as Prime Minister Stephen Harper strenuously recommended at NATO in 2008, today's brutal, illegal, costly war in Europe would never have happened. The Ukraine Free Trade Agreement that Prime Minister Harper first negotiated in 2015 was one part of a much more robust approach. It led the world. It supported the people's Euro-Atlantic aspirations, their territorial integrity, even as war was being waged against them. Conservatives with Harper recognized the importance of supporting ascendant Ukrainian civil society and its democracy. We strengthened Ukrainian democratic institutions, enhanced the rule of law, combated corruption. Conservatives with Harper were at the forefront of imposing sanctions on Russia at every stage. Serious costs were imposed on the Kremlin. Along with free trade, conservatives with Harper stabilized the Ukrainian economy, preventing financial collapse and bolstering Ukrainian resilience. As Russia's aggression escalated, conservatives with Harper launched Operation Unifier, the Canadian Armed Forces mission that founded the modern Ukrainian armed forces. That, as President Petro Poroshenko said, was instrumental in how Ukraine repelled Putin's opening advance toward Kiev in February last year. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, the strength of the conservative approach to securing Ukraine, stabilizing the world, was indeed the envy of the world. It culminated in 2014 when Prime Minister Stephen Harper confronted Vladimir Putin's repugnant deceptions at the G8, looked him squarely in the eye, and said, "Get out of Ukraine." The G8 became the G7, rightly so, because of strong and principled conservative leadership that ensured the integrity of our alliances. Compare that to NDP Liberals who arrived in office to an inheritance in which Canadian influence was undeniable. And what did they do with it? They pursued entreaties of appeasement instead. NDP Liberals dispatched senior diplomats to capitals around the world with a message of Canada is back. Back to the Kremlin, back to Tehran, back to Beijing. Appeasement that even as Russia intensified its invasion of the Ukrainian East, then Foreign Minister Stéphane Dion dispatched his officials to seek to restore good relations with Vladimir Putin. Appeasement by sending emissaries to the clerical regime in Iran, even as it showcased its domestic brutality, exported terror armies now attacking Israel from across the Middle East, and pursued nuclear weapons. And they didn't learn. In 2020, appeasement after Ukrainian Airlines flight PS752 was shot out of the sky by a regime sheltering itself under the human shield of civilian flights, killing 55 Canadians and 30 permanent residents. Appeasement that shocked families of victims, watching their prime minister warmly hold the murderous regime's foreign minister's hand, beam a warm smile, and bow his head. Appeasement by pursuing free trade, extradition, and cybersecurity treaties with Beijing, while turning their back to the trade deal conservatives had negotiated across Asia. Watch, Madam Speaker, as they now pretend C-51 is the singular triumph of a foreign policy that is clearly broken. Conservatives will consult. We will be clear-eyed about the interests of Canadians, and we will take the right decisions for our country and our alliances. Conservatives will pursue policies of peace through strength instead of entreaties of appeasement. So how about a real trade deal that could end the war in Europe? Canada is the sole NATO ally with the potential to backfill European demand with $3 trillion worth in natural resources, the world's fourth largest oil reserves, NATO's third largest reserves of natural gas, and the capacity to scale agricultural products and technologies for the world. Putin today mimics Stalin nearly a century ago, bent on creating famine by weaponizing the food supply, burning and blockading Ukrainian grain so it cannot reach fragile markets. Vladimir Putin had spent years choreographing Germany's dependency on Russian oil, having exploited that to shake down Europe. He intervened in Syria and Libya to subvert pipelines that would supply Europe and amplified misinformation against Canadian energy. It ensured a steady stream of revenue for Russia's war machine, nearly $1 billion a day, including more than $250 million a day from Germany alone to fund his war. When Germany finally realized the costs of this, Chancellor Scholz came knocking on our door for Canadian energy, and we turned him away. Russia and Iran scale production today, evade sanctions, provide discounted prices to Beijing to wage their wars in Europe and the Middle East. Qatar, host to Hamas, inked a 3.5 million ton gas deal with France just this week. If NDP Liberals truly care about trading relationships that support Ukraine, then they can do the one game-changing thing the world has been demanding: end Russia's weaponization of energy and let Canadian resources be what fuels, feeds, and secures the world and Canadians. Across the world, we must confront the illiberal project posed by our medieval rivals upon the modern age of democracies. Our town squares are burning, mobs threatening individual dignity and freedom. The time has come for the return of leaders with conviction, leaders who do not bow before the illiberal age upon us, but who instead unlock the economic and military strength required in this generation's greatest test. I think of Ukraine a decade ago and all that has transpired since, from the jubilation of the revolution of dignity to all the carnage, the rubble, the costs of chaos and disorder that appeasement has resulted in. Hope seems like an idea so far away. 1 year ago, in a report from the bombardment of Kharkiv, an elderly woman stood in the rubble of her apartment. She interrupted her neighbor in the middle of an interview, surveying the damage inflicted by Russia's indiscriminate attacks. She shared 3 words: hope dies last. Hope dies last, Madam Speaker. If we are to live up to our potential as a country, then we will heed her wisdom that without hope we have nothing. It is time to replace a government unwilling to do what Canada must. It is time to replace it with one that delivers upon the strengths of our nation to a world eagerly awaiting them, that restores the promise of Canada to alliances broken so badly by these NDP Liberals. Let's make the trade deal we should be making, the one that delivers hope, the one that delivers the energy that would end the war, bring strength to the alliances we depend on, and secure the future for all Canadians. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? The Honourable